Hi, guys. Welcome to our very first ever Gaming Revival Bulletin. This is the first of our podcast series that we started up with your hosts, me, Zio, and my good friend here, Panda.
What's up, everybody? We decided to start doing some podcasting. With it being the first episode, we figured it would be kind of a smart idea to kind of give a little context on some of the games we enjoy playing. I personally have always been kind of in the genre of MOBAs when I was younger. My cousin was the first one that really got me into video games with Dota, Warcraft 3, all that types of stuff. Over the years, started playing a bunch of WoW. As I've gotten older, first-person shooters really kind of have taken the forefront of that, especially Counter-Strike. So I've played since 1.6 all the way up until Global Offensive now. I do tend to be more erratic with my spending when it comes down to video games, so I tend to have a plethora of video games. So my range of video games really comes down to A, can I play games with friends? You'll probably never see me play a single player game by myself because I enjoy playing games with friends. Zio, what about your experiences?
All right, so my experience is pretty wide. Just like Panda, I kind of started out in a lot of I started out more in like RPGs and stuff like that back in the day, back in the PS2 and N64 era, because we're old. And then I broke off from RPGs, and my first intro to online gaming was Guild Wars 1 and World of Warcraft. And I jumped into two hardcore MMOs right out the gate, and I have been a giant gamer ever since. That was kind of my intro to that. I broke off and I've done a lot of strategy games. So I play a lot of games, and even then just the games that just are fun to chill and sit and think to. So games like RimWorld, games like Kenshi, games like all the Total War series kind of sucked me in for a very large portion there after my WoW phase. It definitely was a phase, Mom. But yeah, I've definitely branched out, and I've played a very wide amount of games. I'm definitely the cheapskate out of the two. I will work a deal, work a sale. I still think like my overall library is bigger because I buy so many games, and I have like the world's worst game ADD, where I will literally like be in love with the game, figure out the mechanics, and immediately stop playing it. And I think that's why I enjoy strategy games. I love figuring out the mechanics of a game. I master the mechanics of a game, and then I am absolutely done with the product. Which I always find funny because people will keep playing, and I'm just like, nope, I've mastered it. I know everything about this game. I'm a genius. All right. Panda and I have also known each other for 10 years now.
Yeah.
Been friends for 10 years. Stood up at my wedding. It was a good time. But back to what we're talking about here with the Gaming Revival Bulletin. We're going to do our first one here based on something that's been pretty close to us, something that we've played a lot together, is a lot of Milsim games. So we're going to kind of break down some nitty gritty on Milsim games and kind of give you a feel as the first intro to the podcast. These won't be like deep dive into each individual game, whereas it's more of an overview of the game and the general experience and life of Milsims as we know it and as we hopefully see it in the future. If you want to take off on the first there.
Well, yeah. So essentially, we've always kind of traveled to the realm of macro milsim. So games like Arma, Hell Let Loose, Squad. Those have always been kind of games that we've drawn together to play when it comes down to first-person shooters. I know like you said, we've been together for 10 years now playing games.
Oh.
And I have yet to get this dude to play some CSGO. He refused to play any form of CSGO.
That's not true. I played a bit when we had a few LAN parties back in the day, the end of LAN parties.
Oh God, I was gonna say I don't know. It's been a while for a LAN party, that's for sure. But yeah. So really, the macro milsim games have really been where we've been able to kind of find a shared ground when it comes down to first-person shooters. Hell Let Loose has been kind of on the radar for us for quite some time. We've actually, in our community of friends, it's probably the largest game that we've gotten everybody to play on. So for us, it's one of those nice things to get 8+ people to actually play a game for once. versus being kind of stuck down to like the standard 4 squad limits, 5 squad limits, depending on what kind of games you're playing. But for those that don't know what Hell Let Loose is, it's a World War II tactical Milsim styled game. So essentially, you have 3 different competing factions depending on what maps you're playing on. You have your standard US, you have Germany, and you have Soviet Russia. And technically, each 3 of those factions have different kits to play with, um, depending on what kind of classes you're playing. When you break it down to the Milsim status, typically as a group or a server, you're going to have one individual person that kind of plays as a commander. They're the person that should be calling the shots from our experiences. Most servers don't get that.
Yeah.
And it tries to follow the hierarchy of a standard command unit. So you have your commander, and then you have your squad leads, and then you have your unit members. And just like any military engagement, you always want to be prepared for whatever situations you come up with. So each unit is allowed a specific type of loadout, whether that be a machine gunner, a specialist, a demolitionist, a engineer. So like you're limited based on what you're capable to do as a squad, and the entire concept is as a commander to help direct and move your squads across the map to take objective points. And essentially most of the maps are predominantly conquest. So each team starts out with 2 points, fights over a middle point. First team to push all the way to the other side of the map wins. They do have a rush style system where you start from one team will start at the far end and they have to push all the way to the other side of the map. I'm not gonna lie, those games are brutal, especially on they have D-Day. So you've got Utah Beach that you're rushing across, and it is the most demoralizing shenanigans that you will ever come across in a game.
Spawning to artillery fire and dying.
I'm like, we'll get to another game later in the podcast, hopefully, depending on how we direct this. But it is the most demoralizing few minutes in a game that I have ever been a part of. But it is 100% worth it at the end of the day. Just trying to overcome that challenge of getting across that beach.
Before we get too far from it, just touching down in terms of like Hell Let Loose and it's the way it plays. A lot of the kits are very focused on what class you're playing, and you're able to pick a rather narrow set of equipment and kit out your character. It's very heavily focused on you playing your role. There are other games like, you get games like Call of Duty and stuff like that where you have people with medical equipment and they just run around and, they're just going to leave you. If you're a medic in Hell Let Loose, you would hope. There's times where medics just run past you, but you play your role. I've played as a medic. My 2 most popular classes are squad lead and medic. Whenever I play as a medic, half the time I don't even have a rifle in my hand. I'm just running behind healing people. That is my entire job. Beyond that, like I won't do anything else because that's my role, and it wants you to play your role. People who play their role and play it efficiently do well. When you have a whole squad of random people running around, it kind of falls apart.
Yeah. A really well equipped squad that is able to communicate with each other can help defend a point long enough for the rest of your team to take over the next point.
Which is what we do most of the time.
This is what happens most times on servers. It's like, you guys attack the point. We'll just chill here on this objective for you guys. You guys just do your thing.
Yeah, we literally defend a point against 2 or 3 squads at a crack at an enemy tank, and everyone's just keeps pushing the point. I find like we do best that way.
Yes.
Which is why like I feel bad as a squad lead because like I'm talking to command and everyone's like, and even then like the commander will be like, well, who's staying back to defend? And then it's just calm silence, and I'm like, our squad will stay back to defend because I know we're competent. So we normally stay back and defend while everyone else is on offensive, but we still see a lot of action.
Right.
We usually just sit there and hold on for dear life as we constantly just keep getting spawn killed. But boy, they can't take the point.
Exactly. The other thing that I've enjoyed about Hell Let Loose is that it's not exactly like hardcore Milsim. It's as what we'll probably term it as Milsim light. It breaks it down into the military structure, gameplay, relatively similar to that kind of mechanics where you do have some tilt left, tilt right. But it's not like super heavy hardcore like Arma where you can literally just about do the splits with your character.
Yeah.
I mean, like you have to hit 10 different keys to do it, but hey, you're able to do it in Arma. But when it comes down to Hell Let Loose itself directly, uh, it's really grown to the point of that the community, I like the toxicity can be there,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there is a strong community, or at least the servers we've chosen to play on. Their communities tend to rely on communication with each other
Yes.
a bit more heavily.
Yes.
And a lot of the times with these Milsim games, that's where the biggest problem is the communication across the board with everybody on the team. Because again, it kind of goes back to that aspect of like, oh, I gotta get kills to be successful. But in these Milsim style games, when we're playing for points, it really comes down to moving your chess pieces correctly across the board.
Kills don't matter at all. The game doesn't even track, like, you get a notice of like your kills and deaths, but the game doesn't track your overall progress of kills and deaths, which is why like it's never really focused. I always hate it when games are like, yeah, kills KD doesn't matter, but we're definitely going to track it though, because then it matters. If you're tracking it, I need a positive KD. But yeah, I feel like the game doesn't necessarily focus on that, and it's definitely a role change. Like we were talking before, where we play with a community of people. A lot of times, like if you guys are playing CS:GO, we'll literally go from, like, you guys will hop in from CS:GO and start playing Hell Let Loose, and there's times where people get tilted really bad because they keep dying, but they're still on the point, they're still protecting the point, or they're still assaulting the point. There's the time where we were playing with a few people, and it was literally our squad defending the point, and we were being hit by at least 3 squads of people, and they were getting mad. They're like, I'm like, but they're not taking the point. That's the thing that matters. They keep killing you, but they're not taking the point, and that's all that matters. If we keep frustrating them, and our team wound up taking the point, and we moved on from there. So that's something to kind of keep in mind with Hell Let Loose. It's a lot less about that. The game, I wouldn't say it's definitely a pretty game in terms of like Milsims that are out there now. It's probably one of the better looking ones,
especially when that artillery starts rolling in, or the carpet bomb.
Well, that's kind of like the winning thing for the game. It's the artillery and the suppression system. Like when you're under artillery fire, like it's crazy. There's dust in the air. Like most games, like an artillery round hits and then dust clears and it's just, you're fine. This one, your camera's shaking a little. Like, it's pretty heavy suppression, and suppression is pretty serious in this game. You can, if you have a good machine gunner who's able to like clear the way for you, or even just keep people suppressed down range where they can't shoot you, you can push pretty well. It's pretty devastating. And I feel like the terrain and like how they do the mapping, like the wall height and everything, I feel like there's a little compression there, but like even when you lay on the ground, it feels like bullets are just inches away from taking you out.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. No, the amount of times where it's like you're just butt clenched, like, oh god,
yeah,
this isn't going to end well, and miraculously make it through somehow. It's like, oh god.
Well, even then, it's not like other shooters where you hit someone 47 times and they eventually go down. There is more of a, you take one shot from a chest from any of like the rifles and the infantry, like even if they're bolt action rifles, you're taking one shot, you're dead. Like that's it, you're down. Unless a medic comes up and takes care of you, you're done. And like that's where like the scary part comes in. Or if you have a machine gunner, like 1 or 2 of those rounds can kill you. So like it's very new. You just ran for 2 minutes from your spawn to get there. You don't want to die. Like there's that kind of investment where like there's that level of seriousness where you're like, I don't want to waste the time I ran to a location, as opposed to other games we'll be bringing up in this series where there's a lot more on the line than just you going to a spot, which I feel like that's like, it makes it a little more intense, so you can run into people who get upset and get tilted. That happens in any game, any online game, you're going to run into that. But I gotta say, like, Hell Let Loose has probably the chillest atmosphere in terms, I use chill lightly, but like the most relaxed atmosphere where like people will run around and generally people just have a good time. People just want to have a good time. They want to win and they want to do well, but a lot of times they just want to have a good time too. And I think it's that objective focus, but with fun in mind, is a good starting point. If you're new to Milsims, or if you've ever wanted to get into Milsims and you're kind of intimidated by them, I felt like before I ever really got started into them, I was really intimidated by Milsims, watching people play them and stuff like that. I'm like, that I'll never be at that point. I feel like there's other games I jumped in first and I was like culture shock, where I was like, this is crazy. But then jumping into things like Hell Let Loose, I wish I honestly had found that first, but maybe I didn't. And where I jumped in at, where we jumped in at now, and where we're playing now, I like it for what it is. Hell Let Loose was it was a pretty focused and a pretty dedicated milsim when it first came out, and it happens to every player base with any MMO game. There's you have the serious, the dedicated players, the hardcore players in the beginning that complain about them placating to the community, which it's a video game what has an online content. You're gonna have to placate the community. That's just kind of how everything works. And so it's gotten a little more tame.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, like across the board for most milsims, everything seems to have gotten a bit more tame, especially now that the genre has kind of exploded. I don't want to say exploded, but
It has.
It's definitely, and something that we'll probably end up discussing at some point is just genres in general. The amount of games that are being pushed out for any genre right now is just absolutely insane compared to what it was a couple of years ago.
Well, even you think like 10 years ago when we got into it, like having a computer just to play video games was, like that was kind of something. Like back in 2010.
Yeah, on that dial up, like mom's got a phone coming in, just like, oh God, no.
Well, that's closer to like 15 years ago. But like, that even then you think like 10 years ago when we started hanging out, like all of us guys that like we got together at a LAN party and that's where we met. So it was just a bunch of people literally sitting in our mutual friend's basement all playing video games. And it was like you brought your computer there. Like it was a weird thing. Like you definitely knew everyone else and there was a nerd. Now like you have people that like you wouldn't suspect, where like it's a lot more commonplace to have people have computer games. It's a lot more commonplace for people to have consoles in general, for people to play video games in general. So all these genres are blowing up. They're going nuts because just the player base is getting so much bigger. So like when I talk about like placating the viewer base, it's really them just trying to appease to a much wider audience for the overall success of any genre. I know a lot of dedicated players in a game will be like, man, this game changed. As someone who played WoW from like the beta, I could be like, yeah, man, this game's totally different. But like, I get it. I understand 100%. I mean, maybe that's not a good example given it's Blizzard, but we're going to gloss over that and just talk about the game in general, or like the changes in general. And you kind of have to understand, for it to be an online game, there has to be change. It's just the way of the world. It's the way of the industry as a whole. It's the way of human nature as a whole. We constantly need change. We constantly need new and exciting things to keep us engaged. Otherwise, you just get bored and you burn out.
Yeah, because let's be real, I have terrible ADHD when it comes down to most things, and when it comes down to games, we have a revolving door of like 2-week periods where it's like, all right, we're playing this.
Or we play it every single day.
Yeah, like that's probably the worst part about our group, is that we hit games way too hard and heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And we like, it's the competitive sense in a lot of this where we all want to strive to be very good at the games that we play, and then we kind of hit this point where we tend to be very good at the games, and then it's like, all right, now I'm bored. It's not as competitive or as straightforward as it used to be, or like there's a meta that you have to follow, and I've never really been the type of person that enjoys following the meta. I'd rather sit down and have fun running around with a bazooka doing dumb stuff in a truck at that point versus having to play a game based off of a meta.
I don't know if you have more on the subject of that game. I feel like that's a good, this is a good time to talk about the next game up in our list. Um, I don't know if you wanna lead that one, talk about that one, but talking about not getting bored, constantly being engaged. You want to run around and do dumb stuff. There's a meta, but it's not really a meta because 90% of it is luck, and it's a game of not really cat and mouse, but cat and large rat. But I don't know. You want to take away this one? Next game on our list?
So our next game on our list that we want to kind of discuss and talk about, which obviously is hitting the community by storm right now with its current new wipe. I mean, like, we're about a week out now,
Yep.
right? It's Tarkov. For us as our gaming group, Tarkov has been this bittersweet game from the get-go since everyone started playing it. I'm really terrible at describing what this game is because it is the definition of emotional damage.
I have like 800 hours in the game, and I still don't know if I like it.
Yes, we like, that's the thing, is our gaming group probably has close to 1,000 hours, the majority of us, and we all still have moments where we get so pissed off at this game that we uninstall it, and then 10 minutes later we're reinstalling it. But like, when the gameplay comes forward, it is actually a very well maintained game when it comes down to the mechanics.
Even
So,
their dev cycle.
yeah, their dev cycle, everything that they've done is, I feel, compared to most other gaming games in general, is that the Tarkov community has been very engaging at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Compared to most other communities, it's the one that I feel the most, like, I can check up on stuff and there's always some form of engagement going on. I think that it has to do a lot with their commitment with streamers. It's that high roulette chance that I believe a lot of people enjoy watching streamers for, is that entire 2 seconds of hardcore engagement and then 10 minutes of just trying to relax your heart a little bit.
So for those few of you that don't know, especially if you're clicking on a podcast about Milsims, or a video about Milsims, Tarkov is a first-person shooter that is heavily focused on, well, I shouldn't say heavily focused on combat realism, but it is a very intense game. It is very unforgiving. Yeah, what you said, it's the embodiment of emotional damage. It is a great game. The community engagement is fantastic. I feel like the community overall, like when you talk about like Milsims and stuff, there are a lot of games that are on our list here that we're going through have honestly a pretty toxic community. Like, I just talked about Blizzard before, speaking of toxic communities, but like Tarkov in general, it's very like the closest thing to like the Wild West you can get. Like the stereotypical Wild West, like, sorry partner, it's you or me. Like there's no hard feelings. Like, you'll just, like, even then you'll hear comms afterwards, like someone will get killed in a one-on-one, and you're just like, shit. Like, that's it. That's like the extent of it. Like, everyone's like, man, that sucks. And then you sit there and get mad for a minute as you're sitting there on the opening screen. You uninstall, you get up, you walk away, go make a sandwich, come back, reinstall the game. It's a weird thing. And the thing with Tarkov, why it's so stressful in terms of that, is it's very loot based and it's very loot driven. So any gear that you take into a match, you can lose all the gear minus one small little crate you can take in with you, which you can fill with your personal goodies. But there's more on the line than when, like, you can lose your whole kit, you lose your loadout, and you have a inventory system and a whole in-game economy to manage. Like, there's a lot to it where when you start playing Tarkov, at first, it is a very intimidating game. Even if you're new, even if you're not new to Milsim, and you've played other, if you play games like Arma, you play games like Squad, you play games like Hell Let Loose, any of them, even like War Rights, you play any Milsim, jumping into Tarkov is very intimidating. And if you're doing it alone, 100% props to you. 100%. Like if I didn't have a group of guys with me, I would have been like, nope, not for me. I'd have 10 hours in the game and I'd never touch it again. I'd forget the whole account existed. But it's very engaging gameplay. They constantly, I wouldn't say the updates are frequent, but the updates, well, there's small updates that they do, which they do just game fixes and stuff like that. Out of all the games where people know, like, developers, like within the Tarkov community, like the main developer, his name's Nikita. Everyone knows, like, everyone's heard his podcast, everyone's heard his things. He's Russian, I believe.
Yeah.
Somewhere from the region. And like there's just him trolling the community, and it's just like, and it's not like an evil malicious trolling, it's just like a matter of fact kind of trolling, where it's like, yeah, you'll probably die. And it's just, hey, that's the community. Like, there are times where you get frustrated, but you keep coming back. You continuously, it's a game that I love, but I'm not sure if I love it. Like, I can't really put my finger on everything that I love about it. Just like how in Hell Let Loose, like one of the most satisfying, like one of the best systems that they have is like the artillery and the suppression. With Tarkov, I gotta say, like the best like mechanic, the best feature in the game is honestly the audio. There are many times where us young rats were playing the game and just freaking out at every crunch of a leaf, every branch, every twig. Is that you? It's almost like a horror game. Your first like 500 hours, it's a horror game. You're just scared of every little thing.
I mean, like, I just want to input is, like, yes, for the most part, the large majority of our team, I'll just say a team, our Discord group that we play with. When we first started playing the game, it was train wreck. Like, don't get me wrong, we played CS:GO, we played other games where communication and all that stuff is kind of key, but the amount of development that playing Tarkov has had on us as a group is surprisingly insane, considering how much time we have put into the game itself. When it comes down to team aspect, the people that tend to work together and communicate more and are more focused and directed on what we're doing in the game, we see way more success than the individuals that are just kind of running around, just kind of willy-nilly going on with whatever they want to do. Because at the end of the day, as a group, some of us are very good at first-person shooters, some of us aren't. And as a team, our communication...
Why are you not at me?
What? I'm not just saying you.
Just fuck.
But at the end of the day, the communication aspect and just the knowledge of where everyone's at and our ability to move around maps allows us to overcome most obstacles. Will I admit that we still make mistakes? Hell yeah. I mean, like, it's really disappointing when you come across a 2-man and they wipe a 5-man of kitted guys. Like, it is really disappointing. Yeah. But hey, for some of us, we take it as a learning experience, and we try to make us as a group better when it comes down to that communication overall.
Yeah, that's kind of it for Tarkov. I feel like we hit every nail on the head for that one. That was really good.
It's pretty straightforward. The only reason really we want to talk about it is that yes, it's the Milsim style game, but also it's something that we've definitely invested a lot of time and energy into.
Yeah.
If, like, again, like Zio said, if you're committed to trying it out by yourself, bravo. But it's definitely one of those games where if you can get one or two other additional people to play with you, it just makes that experience that much better, I feel. Granted, 5-man groups become very difficult trying to run around just because of the whole communication aspect, especially when you're new to the game. But if you're committed to playing those types of games with your friends, you can really see that development and camaraderie come through when you're playing with those individuals at the end of the day. And like in the list of Tarkov, it tends to kind of sit in a micro view of the Milsim genre. Like there's a macro and then there's like a micro, and micro we're going to kind of categorize as like small, less than like 20 people per server, whereas macro is going to be your big like 100 200 man servers. um and that's where Tarkov kind of lies in, is the micro view. But it really focuses not only on the mechanics. So you have your tilts left, you have your tilts right, you have soft tilt, you have a tilt hold. It even goes to the aspect of like just reloading a magazine. You can you can reload, you can fast reload, you can drop a mag and to throw a new mag in. You can eject just one out of the chamber. Like there's so many different mechanics that you can do with your gun that it's, compared to anything else outside of Arma, it's probably the next closest thing to Arma when it comes down to those specific kinds of mechanics.
Yeah, it definitely has. It's more like a firearm sim than anything, where you get to make and manufacture, and not necessarily manufacture, but you get to make and kit out certain firearms, different ballistics with ammo and stuff like that. It really is a unique game. But bringing up Tarkov and Milsims, I know it's not like a hardcore Milsim. It's, people talk Milsim, you're like, wow, these guys are talking about Tarkov. What the hell are they talking about? The way Tarkov influences the Milsim community and the way Tarkov affects and changes things. There's games like Hunt that's out now. I would say that's pretty heavily inspired by Tarkov, where it has a PvE, PvE element, which, again, talking about micro sims, like that's really close, and I think that's kind of touching more on the future of we'll touch more on this later, but kind of how we view the future of Milsims overall, talking about like breaking everything down to micro sims and stuff like that. Whereas yes, the market's being over flooded. I think they'll be the key games, but I think micro sims are going to be where it's at, where it's a small community, just you, anywhere between 2 or 3 to like 10 people. Like that's where sims are going to be at in the future. But I think that kind of puts that in there, and I guess we can talk about our next and the grandfather. We kind of went down the list in terms of like our experience. We probably have a lot of time playing in Hell Let Loose and Tarkov. And we still have a lot in these next games, but definitely more in the others. But the next one I kind of bring up is Arma. Arma 3 in particular, I think we both have the most amount of experience playing. I haven't really played Reforger, have you?
I tried.
You tried?
I'm not going to deny that fact. I tried.
It's very buggy.
I like on that launch week. I tried and I kind of gave up, and I'll be patient on it and patiently wait for things. By this point, it's probably good to go.
Yeah.
I haven't looked anything up technically on Reforger recently, but it's definitely something that I probably should look into. But again, Tarkov is kind of forefront of all of us right now.
Yeah. So with Arma, everyone talks about Arma, especially when you come to Milsims. Arma is the grandfather, the daddy, the big one. Arma 3 is probably the forerunner for all Milsims. A lot of people get their first taste of Milsim through Arma. Arma 3 has been out for a long time now, at least 10 years.
I feel like I should know this, but I don't.
We
should have. We're terrible. We didn't even look up this information.
I didn't think about it till just this second. All this other stuff that we got, that we've looked up and gone into, but yeah, almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. It's September 12th, 2013. So yeah, almost 10 years that Arma's been out. It's one of the first tastes that a lot of people have for a Milsim game, and that's where I think a lot of it starts from. Well, obviously other stuff, but
it's a very steep learning curve.
Yes.
It is an extreme learning curve.
It is. It feels, I don't want to say dated, but, well, I mean, it does. It does feel dated, and I think that's where a lot of other games have expanded upon, including other games on our list here where we talk about Milsims, even kind of Hell Let Loose a little, where they just kind of had the base for Arma 3 and then expanded or added their own spin. I'd say Hell Let Loose did a little bit different, where Squad kind of feels more like a genuine expansion onto an Arma game. Oh, yeah.
At first it definitely started to feel more like Arma, but now as it's updated, it's kind of gone its separate way.
So when you talk about Milsims, everyone thinks Arma. You're going to think about the constant communication. You're going to think of intense firefights. You know, it's not forgiving. It's not a Battlefield. It's not a Call of Duty. It's very objective focused. It's one of those games where, yeah, kills matter. All that stuff matters. Taking out enemy assets is important. But honestly, playing objectives is it. And I think that appeals to a whole different subgroup of people where they're more focused on, and the reason why Milsims appeased to people, calls to people. Anyway, it draws people in is it's less of the run and gun shooter, and it's more of the focus on actually playing as a group and playing as a team. It's that strategy element, it's that tactical element that pull people in, and that's where I think a lot of games coming out now really try to focus on that tactical element. They really want to give those people that want that experience a more precise, a more very narrow slice of the pie, what they're looking for. I feel like there isn't, like, especially for like Arma 3, like that's it. Like if you don't know Arma 3, I don't know, man.
I mean, like when it comes down to Arma 3, especially if you're trying to get into the Milsim kind of headspace with everything, it's relatively like the game itself is going to take you a little bit to know and understand. Yes. B, trying to find servers that
cater to new players.
Yeah, because at this point it is so dedicated. Yes, there are like noob friendly servers,
but they're not. But their idea of noob friendly is you have 100 hours in the game.
Yeah,
like
yeah. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like it's really rough. So trying to find a community to play with in Arma is probably like one of your first objectives that you want to do, is kind of jump from server to server, try and make some relationships with some of the people, especially the people running the servers.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the first thing that I can suggest, especially if you want to kind of get into the more story-driven, hardcore event style events that those communities put on. Yes, you can find stuff like that kind of here and there. I forgot what the Reforger's calling it, like where the map essentially is constantly evolving as people fight for points.
Well, that's one thing too, and you talk about like the map and stuff. Arma's gameplay is usually, there's a lot more like servers with like map editors where it's not the standard formula of gameplay. It's a little more broken up. Sorry, the bird's going off in the background.
Hi, Arrow.
It's a little less formulaic. So normally they have something where there's someone kind of overlooking and kind of essentially like it's like D&D where you have someone that can set up situations as they happen and make it a little more dynamic, and then kind of interact with people in that way too, instead of just here's point A, here's point B. There's PvP matches, there's PvE matches. Realistically, if you're looking for the broadest taste of what Arma is, that's it. Like there's so much. Like if you want to do Milsim, like Arma 3 is a good thing. If you ever like, I'm thinking about it, but I only like doing this, I only like doing that. I mean, one of the big games for like zombie survivals, DayZ, is a spin-off of an Arma mod. Like this has the most flavor, the most range. Like there's no other game that's really gotten close to how wide of a spectrum Arma actually hits. And like everyone else, they try to narrow that spectrum to give like I said, the slice of pie per user. And I really feel like it's so broad. Like you can find lobbies for literally anything. You join a Discord for Arma, you can find other people that'll invite you. They'll be like, oh, well, you want to do this? You want to do more of a survival thing? We can do that here. You want to do more of a short map PvP? You do that here. Like, you want to do squad-based stuff? Do that here. You want to do some PvP events? Do that here. Like, there's so much.
Hey, don't forget the RP.
Oh yeah, there's a very heavy RP element in there. Like it's crazy. Everyone talks like RP, they talk about like Grand Theft Auto because it's the big thing for streaming now. It's like people RPing GTA, but like realistically the Arma RP stuff is nuts. It's nuts.
I miss those days. I'm not gonna lie. The good old days of going on.
It's probably not as prevalent as it was, but
No, it's not as big as GTA is now, but it definitely the RP element for Arma was definitely at its peak was really good and very enjoyable.
unless I'm incorrect, I don't do a lot of RPing and I don't know a lot about RP from what I know, like Arma 3, like the RP community is kind of what started a lot of the RP stuff out there
We should actually,
in terms of online games.
we should actually think about that and throw that down as a note for a discussion at a different time because I feel like we can really deep dive into that, especially if we want to talk about D&D in the future and the evolution kind of and thoughts on how the resurgence of D&D being more accepted has allowed for other platforms like Arma and GTA to have these RP servers because ultimately that's what D&D is, role play.
Yeah.
So that's something to take note for a different discussion at some time, but yeah.
It's all largely based on like role playing and stuff like that, which is just it's all immersion based, which is why it does so well with these communities where it focuses on immersion, focuses on the players' involvement with the community, their interactions within game, which I think is what really drives the community.
Nope.
But yeah, we could do a whole bulletin on just Arma 3. I feel like there's so much we can talk in there. But yeah, we just kind of want to touch note on that. The next one up after Arma 3, like we could kind of get into Reforger and the hot mess that it kind of is. But just like any game on launch, it's going to be buggy. It's going to be rough. This one's a little extra rough, but is there polish? If they polish this rock up, I think there's something there. There's a diamond in the rough.
Oh god, yeah, definitely. Like at the end of the day, the fact that they've actually released something to the community after how many years, like that shows signs that there's progress and they're working towards something.
Yeah.
Because the thing that Bohemia isn't just a gaming development center, like that they're a straight military simulation company that gives out training to governments and I'm blanking on the word. Not military, like third party military.
The PMC training or like what I don't really know what you're getting at here.
Like you have your government, but like over
Your
in
police
Iraq,
forces and stuff.
yeah.
Oh,
I like outside of just the government, there's like the private military, like groups that do their thing. So it's not just like they're directed at video games. So from a video game perspective, it's really nice to see that they're looking to update their product so that way at least we have some form of like, hey, something brand new.
Yeah. That kind of takes us to our next little stepping stone, especially talking about the broad spectrum of Arma, where like something that kind of narrows it down would be our next one here, where we're going to talk about Squad. Squads, we talk about like, to bring it up, I'll start with like the bad stuff first right away, because like I'll just get that out of the way. Squad has probably the most toxic community. It's a pretty rough community. Like, you'll just hop in there, and if you're like, hey guys, I'm new, someone will be like, screw you. Like immediately, like there's no passing it up, or they'll like complain that someone's new there. Like I've played enough Squad, and every time like I've done that, but even then I feel like Squad, I shouldn't say that because back when we started playing Squad, that was probably like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
When did Squad come out? Now I need a timeline.
Look at us. We're terrible at this.
Yeah, we don't even know. It's our first one. It's rough. Bear with us. But yeah, we played Squad quite a bit, and then, well, probably not quite a bit. Oof. No, 2020.
Well, we're talking beta and that stuff.
We played it, and then it was.
Or was it really in 20? No, I feel like
I think
it was
2019
full release.
Yeah, we still played it before that, but Anyway, like I feel like now it's probably a lot lighter. We played a couple matches recently and it wasn't as bad. But this is where we talk about like the placating the fan base sort of thing, where like Squad was a really intense experience starting. It was a very hardcore experience. Which even then the last time we played it, I feel like it was the same. It was all the group of guys we got together and we were really just screwing around, but we were still somehow like carrying. Like it was just the dumbest stuff ever. Like we ran a truck down a hill and we ran like it was dumb. It was just stupid. We were being dumb. And it was,
guys, we're gonna go the complete opposite direction of where we need to go. All right.
We ran into half the team, we killed 2/3 of them and then got clapped. But yeah, in terms of like Arma, I would say that that Squad's a less intense gameplay than something like a Tarkov or an Arma. Whereas like Tarkov has really good audio, Hell Let Loose has really good like immersion in terms of like artillery and suppression system. Arma has this really broad spectrum of what they try to appease to. I think like Squad's really, at least to me, is very middle of the road. Like
at this point, its development is very middle of the road.
I don't dislike Squad. Would I suggest it to new players? Probably not. Would I suggest it on like a Steam sale? Yeah. Like
at this point, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's new stuff, especially with like Reforger out and stuff, when people talk about like, well, it's the newer Arma. Like, well, there already is the newer Arma now. And I'd rather just wait for them to patch it and play it that way.
At the end of the day, for Squad, it'll always have a home. When it comes down to it, like the worst parts about Squad and Hell Let Loose is really trying to get onto servers, especially if you're trying to get onto a server with 5 or 6 guys.
Yeah.
If you don't hit that like special like map ending kind of deal, you're typically stuck waiting in between kind of like people joining and not really hitting the fullest with everybody. But at the same time, like Squad still hits some points where Hell Let Loose doesn't, because again, Hell Let Loose is more World War II, whereas Squad is more modern day. So that like when we break down Squad versus Hell Let Loose, they're both very similar games. It's just that Squad has kind of taken itself a different direction than what Hell Let Loose has. Both systems work very well in terms of how you progress on maps and what you need to do. But I don't know. I feel that Hell Let Loose has done a better way to make the games run and feel as though you're moving faster than what Squad does.
Yes.
Because Squad at times, just like I'm not gonna lie, Arma always felt like a running simulator. Squad kind of fell into that kind of spectrum of like, all right, well, I got left behind. I now have a 10-minute run to get to the objective point. At which point, my squad lead hasn't placed a rally point or a garrison hasn't been built yet, and I get there and I get clapped by the enemy team, and now I have to run for another 10 minutes.
That's the same issue as Hell Let Loose. If you have a bad squad lead, you have a bad squad lead.
You not to say that it doesn't happen in Hell Let Loose, but the maps for some reason make it seem more forgiving than what Squad does.
There's more cover, there's more. That's the other thing about it, again, going back to Hell Let Loose, like the cover in Hell Let Loose is crazy. There are a lot of open spaces, but there's also a lot of cover within those spaces, and there's a lot of foliage and stuff like that kind of block all that up. Where I feel like in Arma, there's just a lot of open spaces.
Yeah.
Where like there's a lot of fields, there's one wall between 10 miles of field, and you're like, no, like break it up a little more, chop it up. Like it does get a little rough, especially like when you're trying to push and you just can't. Like it's rough. You need armored support to do the bare minimum. I feel like I'm complaining about the game. I don't mean that. I don't mean it in a bad way at all. Like I do enjoy Squad. I've never like had an experience with Squad where I'm like, this is a horrible game. I've just had it where I'm just like, yeah, it was a good game.
Compared to the rest of the list of games that we've gone through so far, and a game that I felt had the most potential actually seemed to be my least favorite out of all of the genre
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which is really funny because there was like when it first launched, there was a lot of really high hope for it, and it just never really kind of hit that peak that I personally had hoped for. Whereas Hell Let Loose and Arma, like they've always satisfied that itch that I was always trying to strive for in those games. Squad is by far a very good system. I'm not like trying to negative on all that type of stuff. Will I go back and play it? Hell yeah, I'll still go back and play it. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the first one to suggest it. I'm going to suggest Hell Let Loose over Squad any points in the day.
Yeah.
Especially like right now, we're super heavy into Tarkov. If I need a break from Tarkov, especially with them being a very modern based game, I'm going to be like, hey, anyone want to do some CS:GO? Anyone want to do some Hell Let Loose?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think it needs there needs to be a lot of push for people to play Squad. Even when we recently played Squad, we played it for a week. Then we were like, yeah that's enough Squad.
I'm not going to deny the fact that I felt bad for a buddy of ours who just recently purchased Squad during the the sale that was just going on.
Mm-hmm.
All he wanted to do was figure out how to play the Star Wars mod, which to be honest, I would love to try and figure that out. Like, if the modding community in that, from what I've seen, have accomplished with like the Star Wars mod, I will 100% be down to go play that. But he couldn't figure it out, so he refunded the game. So now I don't see had he been like, hey, I'm trying to play the Star Wars mod, I probably would have been like, yo, let's figure this out. But here had already refunded the game by the time.
Yeah.
I was like, dang it, I would have been down.
Yeah, I would have reinstalled for that if there would have been a Star Wars mod. That would have gotten that fantasy nerdy part of me going.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say, where's the lightsaber?
There's like a bunch of them in the case there at the bottom. So then I guess that kind of rounds us off here where we're talking about kind of the future where we see Milsims and where we see them heading from this point on. I feel like the future of Milsims is only going to get better. There may be certain games like Arma or Arma Reforged that are going to be definitely like the Milsim game, like the bigger Milsim games for the big community engagement. But I feel like this is just the start of a much larger community that's again going to have their very narrow slice of the pie. You have stuff like Ready or Not, you have stuff like GTFO. There's another one where we played where it was like the SCP Pandemic. That was okay. That definitely has a lot of polish on it. But yeah, where it's that very, very niche. That's where the communities are going to break down to a very niche slice. But I still think other games like Arma really kind of paved the way for everything. With integration like VR and stuff like that into Milsims, it just increases the immersion. It's going to make it, if anything, I see Milsims taking off in comparison to like other genres like strategy with the help of VR. Whereas like obviously there isn't much you can do there, but I feel like there's going to be a better crossover between the two. Even then, there's already VR games and a lot of that Milsim stuff. It's doing well in terms of sales. I'm not sure about their numbers, but when you look up best sale, like the games are up there. It's a lot of shooters like that.
Mm-hmm. Like Pavlov. That's probably the most notable one for VR. Yeah. Even before we did our research, I knew of Pavlov.
Yeah,
and
I don't even have VR.
But yeah, so like when it comes down to the VR content, I think again, the part of the Milsim is people want that immersion factor, and having the VR and seeing where that goes over the next couple of years. I think out of any game genre, VR will have the most effect on the military simulation games. Because I'm not gonna lie, having to hit 10 buttons just to do like a crouch roll or something in Arma doesn't make sense. But hey, if I can physically do it through VR, 10 times easier.
Well, the other thing too is especially in terms of like community longevity, I think with VR and the advancements within the community where people can get their slice of pie instead of constantly feeling just like unfulfilled with the game that they're playing, I feel like the communities overall will last longer. Obviously, there will be games that pop up and that fizzle out, but I feel like the Milsim game is probably going to be one of the longer lasting and just continuously growing communities. I don't think there's any real stopping it. I think it's just going to continuously grow. Um, and I feel like a lot of them, when we talked about games like Tarkov, another thing that we brought up in there, is it's going to have smaller player bases with higher levels of communication, which again, bringing back that tactical talk or that tactical point was, it's more on the player and more involvement with a very small tight knit group, and I think that's kind of a separate subsect of milsim where you don't necessarily have like the larger giant drawn out battles, but you have more of like very personal, very tight knit groups, and I feel like milsims will kind of split and branch down their two separate roads at that point. But at the heart of it, they're all just going to be milsims through and through.
I was just thinking about it. Technically, Planetside would be more or less a milsim.
Yeah.
That's a game that kind of keeps resurging in our group. It's not as popular, but even still, it's a very basic form of military simulation.
Very basic.
That one definitely requires the communication of outfits if you want to be. And like when I say outfits, we're talking like full platoon size regiments working together for a single cause.
Yeah.
I mean, like when we sit down and look at Hell Let Loose or some of these other games, we're talking only what 100
players, both sides.
both sides, whereas Planetside we're talking several hundred people aside.
Yeah, you get into some pretty crazy firefights. Like at their top, like there were times where I remember just like at least a couple hundred people shoved into one giant mega structure, and it's just chaos. But like branching down, especially because if you're looking into this and you don't play a lot of milsims, I will say some of the other ones that we never really touched down on the list are probably good starting points and jumping off points. So like War of Rights and Holdfast are more like the Revolutionary War, and Holdfast is like World War One, I believe.
Yeah.
Or is that before World War One?
I think it's like a weird.
Or like the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
It's kind of there where it's muskets and stuff like that. Honestly, between like Hell Let Loose, War of Rights, Holdfast, those are ones that I would say are probably the most new milsim player friendly. Like the most jump in and play and kind of figure out and dip your feet. Like I would start there if you're going, and then maybe go to some of the other ones. And if you're crazy enough, jump to Tarkov. Just do it. It's one of those it's one of those games. It's just like that crackhead outside 7-Eleven. It's just there.
It's just always there.
It's just always there. It's just that constant itch. That deep seated embarrassment. That family shame. That's what it is.
Definitely.
But yeah, like I kind of said, we didn't really want to do a deep dive, even though we kind of did deep dive a few of these games, especially like Hell Let Loose and Tarkov. We kind of did really deep dive. But yeah, this is just our idea on Milsim. Did you anything you want to add, like the future of Milsims and stuff like that, or where you see Milsims going from this point on, like where you see it expanding?
Personally, no. I feel like you hit everything kind of square on the head there, but at the same time, it's one of those things where we live in an uncertain world, and really what it comes down to is what people are willing to make and create. That's what it comes down to, is someone having that creative vision to create a particular game. And so we might see these games, and for some reason someone might just hit something out of the water that none of us ever expected. But for what we have now, the micro kind of tactical definitely is probably going to be a more focus for the milsim genre in a whole.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that that kind of wraps up our little podcast here. Sorry, it was kind of a long one for our first one. We kind of went on again. It'll be a little more to the point. I feel like there are things we kind of nerded out a little bit, especially
just
early
a
on.
little bit.
There's a little bit of nerding out. It's a whole genre we feel very passionately about. We go back and forth. But yeah, thank you.
We gotta figure out where this is going up, but I'm assuming that we're going to try and figure out how to get this up on Spotify. We'll push this onto YouTube as well. Is where we'll probably mainly be pushing all of these. However, don't hesitate to communicate with us. We'd like to hear from the community. We like to be directed more towards everybody. We want to improve and do better. So if there's anything that people want to suggest, any of that type of stuff, don't hesitate. You can reach me through Steam at Pwn Panda. I also have, like, I started trying to stream, so I do have a YouTube, Pwn Panda. I do have Twitter, and all the standard socials. So you can find me anywhere there. While we kind of figure out what we're directly doing with the podcast.
Yeah, we like you said, we're gonna mainly upload a lot to YouTube. I also, for a long time, I was on Twitch and took a little bit of a break, and I will be coming back to more YouTube content and to do more YouTube content and kind of focus on that. But yeah, we will probably branch off and at least do like a Spotify playlist, you know, if they would have us. But yeah, that's kind of our goal from here. We're not sure where everything is going to pan out from this point, but we are going to try to branch out as much as possible. And yes, if you want to get a hold of us, please do. We have a Discord. We'll add all the links and everything in the description, where you guys will be able to get to us, talk to us. If you have anything you want to say, comment on a video, join the Discord, start a discussion, hop on in, have a little talk with us. But we have a bit of a community. It's been a little dormant now, but we're brushing the dust off.
We'll say Zio's had a community for a while. He actually was starting, as much as he doesn't want to admit it, he did have a relatively successful start to a Twitch stream.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're trying to revive that, but also I have a community of friends that I play with that we're trying to build this into to include more of them. So
yeah. But thank you all for your time. Hopefully you see you all soon.